31 down, 9 to go. 5 more roads to victory to travel. Ladies and gentlemen, internet, my name is Peridiam, and welcome to part 3 of 4, covering every Survivor winner's journey who was not on Winners at War +1. And if you notice, any particular winner is not included in the sequence of winners in this video, check the description to find their journey. Otherwise, let's keep up the pace. 5 more winners to discuss, starting off with the #1 best winner, gameplay-wise anyway, in Survivor history. From Season 17, Gabon, Earth's Last Eden, we have your local high school science teacher, particularly that of Julie Berry. It's Bob Crowley, or shall we say Robert. Put some respect on his name. The man wore his buff as a bow tie. Bob entered the season back when Survivor just couldn't be bothered to create their own tribes, so they made the contestants ruin the season themselves. But no, really, the 2 oldest players were placed as tribe captains, and so here Bob was out of the gate in the spotlight. He was able to pick the first member of his new yellow Coda tribe, and he chose Ace. Bob is perhaps best remembered for being a kind of Survivor MacGyver. He was a forever Boy Scout who crafted all kinds of things, most notably hidden idols, but also in the premiere we saw him putting together the roof of one of the tribe's huts. Bob came off fairly likable, and I believe it's this disarming and unassuming nature, as well as being a useful contributor, that allowed him to be approached by a 4-person alliance for him to jump on and be their 5th. With 9 members on the tribe, this alliance held a majority as he allied himself with Marcus, Charlie, Corinne, and Jackie, and they were known as the Onion Alliance because they had layers, of which Bob was for sure the furthest from the core. Bob was happy tagging along with the majority. It was safe and it bought him more time, so why not? He also got along with these players, and so when they went to Tribal Council on day 9, they voted out Paloma, a player on the outs. From here, Bob doesn't go to Tribal again until the final 11, right before the presumed merge. He does get swapped onto a new tribe on day 12 alongside his fellow allies Corinne, Charlie, and Marcus, alongside the opposing tribe Fong members of Randy, Susie, and Dan. And Bob was ranked pretty highly amongst the rest of his tribe in this swap, so you know what? Good for Bob, he's clearly valued. Randy despised his previous tribe and immediately jumped ship to join the Onions. However, Bob's alliance lost a member on the other side, on the other tribe, in Jackie, which meant Bob kind of moved up a spot in the alliance hierarchy, but then when Randy showed up, Bob pretty much moved back to his original spot at number 5. This meant Susie and Dan were on the bottom of the swap tribe, with both of them trying to get in good with the Onion majority. And this is where things begin to go downhill really fast. The Onions decide to split their votes between Dan and Susie in the event of an idol, since Dan could have had one given he went to Exile Island many episodes ago, and that was where idols were hidden. When Dan was voted out here 4-3, it signaled to Susie loud and clear that she was not valued by this majority. She was expendable. I really think the Onions, including Bob, should have done more than just whisper sweet nothings into her ear and then turn around and vote for her. Right after this, a second tribe swap hits at the final 10 out of the blue at the merge, and now the 2 tribes are still 2 tribes, but each are reduced to 5. Bob has Marcus and Susie, and they're also joined by Kenny and Crystal. The divide between these 5 is pretty clear, and Bob pretty much does not maneuver whatsoever to change what happens next. Susie turns on him and Marcus, and they vote out Marcus, clearly the bigger threat. So at the final 9, the 2 tribes merge, and Bob rejoins Charlie, Corinne, and Randy, and they're pitted against the other obvious alliance of Kenny, Crystal, Susie, and Maddie. This leaves Sugar in the middle, a player who was kind of all over the place. She had been sent to Exile Island 5 straight times and was also in possession of the actual real idol, and she was the swing vote. She ultimately chose to go with the Merry Band of Misfits, the Fong Alliance, and out went Charlie. Also, Bob went to Exile Island here and discovered the idol was missing, and thus he had no ace up his sleeve. So he managed to pull off a pretty decent move by creating a fake idol out of beads and a rock and some other random baubles he found around camp and at challenges. Bob was crafty after all, and this was him at his prime. At the final 8, it's clear to Bob he is firmly at the bottom and in trouble. Himself, Corinne, and Randy are facing a firing squad and have no hope. Bob goes back to Exile Island and gets a sweeping helicopter shot, of course, and then back to camp. A plan is concocted. A plan to humiliate Randy. his ally. Basically, the idea is that Randy decided to go nuclear to draw votes onto him, and then they would use Bob's fake idol to save Randy. The problem was that Randy believed this idol was real, and Bob went along with Randy because Sugar hated Randy and wanted to get him humiliated after he played Bob's fake idol. I kinda wish that in this instance, Bob could have brought Sugar over to his side and smoothed the relationship between her and Randy somehow. She did have the real idol after all, but I get it, it's never that simple. Instead, Bob burns Randy and sends him packing. Bob then creates a second fake idol, yeah, another one at the final 7, and he does let his last ally, Cochran, in on this idea. It's a fake. I'm not humiliating you two, don't worry. Bob wins immunity, so he's safe, which means he can use his fake idol to get the Fong Alliance to split their votes, and who knows, maybe something crazy happens. While I don't give too much credit to Bob for how everything pans out following this final 7 vote, it needs to be said that I think Bob winning immunity and forcing a split vote to occur because of his fake idol is ultimately what paves his road to victory. The Fong split their votes, and it causes infighting at the final 6, but Bob wins immunity again and again, both at 6 and at 5. He does get into a weird deal with Kenny, where Kenny tries to dupe him into giving up immunity, only for Kenny to then vote Bob out. Bob didn't fall for it, but it almost could have happened. At the final 4, Bob failed to win immunity, and it would have seemed his game was over. However, Sugar decided to tie the vote 2-2 to give Bob a fighting chance, and he went to fire against Maddie, whom he beat. This tie vote really came down not so much to Bob doing anything, but Sugar just liking Bob enough to save him. Again, from the beginning I said Bob had a very likable, disarming nature to him. She had recently lost her father, and she found Bob reminded her of him. So I guess being old might be the best move made all season. At Final Tribal, Bob is sitting next to Sugar and Susie, and he's pretty much got 4 votes locked up with Marcus, Charlie, Corinne, and Randy, his previous Onion allies. Bob has a pretty bad performance here. He admits he never had much strategy, never needed to, and I guess he was kind of right. I think the votes for him were partially against Sugar and Susie more than they were just for Bob, but hey, you know what? It's Gabon. A win's a win.
When I came to Africa, I came here to experience not only Survivor, but sort of learn about myself, to really think about how lucky a person I am, what a wonderful family I have, and what a beautiful place Africa is. I see why they call it the Garden of Eden.
The winner of Survivor Gabon, Bob.
Following Gabon, we have Season 18 Survivor Tocantins, the Brazilian Highlands, with James Thomas, also known as JT, the good old country boy with a heart of gold and an immaculate social game, at least in this season, anyway. JT is best known in Tocantins for his 7-0 shutout at the final tribal against his #1 ally all season in Steven, and how everyone in the jury loved him to the point where some jurors even wanted him to win before they were even voted out. On day 1, JT was placed on the Red Jalapao tribe, or as Sandy says, the Jalapeno. It's a tribe of 8, and he formed a guys alliance with Steven, Joe, and Spencer, promising to work together. Likewise, he particularly bonded the closest with Steven, who was a city boy, and there was a fun dichotomy between the two, given JT was a country guy with a strong southern accent. JT was a physically strong provider for the group, always seemed to work hard, especially in the challenges. Heck, at one point, he lost a tooth after taking a rough dive to catch a ball. The Jalapao tribe picked off the 2 clear outsiders in Carolina and Sandy first, with both tribes being tied in numbers 6-6 after 4 episodes. The guys' alliance was still pretty strong, but what's more, JT's bond with Steven eventually brought Taj into the fold, making them a stronger trio. Taj held the hidden idol, and both her and Steven had a secret exile alliance with the opposing tribe. due to the tribes mingling with each other with each Exile Island visit. When the vote was flipped to Spencer in episode 5, this would pave the way for this guy's alliance to dissipate, and now JT's trio of himself, Steven, and Taj to control the vote if they went back to tribal, which they did. The three decided to pick off the remaining outsiders, Sydney, and blindsided Joe too, who believed it was Taj who was leaving. Halfway into the season, the Jalapao tribe was reduced to 4 members who weren't entirely united either, but then the merge hits, and suddenly Jalapao appears a lot better off than the numbers would dictate. The imposing Tambira tribe of 6 was really fractured, with a trio of 3, Coach, Tyson, and Debbie, a duo of 2, Brendan and Sierra, and a lone wolf player in Aaron. Not to mention, JT's allies Steven and Taj had this secret exile alliance with Brendan and Sierra. Meanwhile, Coach wanted to form a warrior alliance with JT and Steven, and then Aaron despised everyone on her tribe. Through all of this, you kind of begin to see how JT walked right into a perfect setup to take advantage of some massive cracks. Initially, the vote was to get Brendan out and get rid of the Exile Alliance, but then Joe, an original Jalapao, was medevaced at the merge. Okay, oh well. He was on the bottom anyway, and it didn't seem to affect much going forward. Because at the next vote, JT committed himself to the Warrior Alliance, also looping in Aaron, and Brendan and Sierra were blindsided, and Coach could not have been happier. Until the next vote anyway, where JT, Steven, and Taj made a great play by pivoting to pull in Sierra, who was now ostracized, as well as Aaron, the lone wolf. These 5 held the majority at 8, and another blindside hit us with Tyson going, the first episode of Survivor I ever watched live. That said, JT was in such good graces with all of the players he was turning his back on, and because they all hated each other more, and JT was just very charming, still seemed trustworthy, the remnants of the Exile Alliance and the Warrior Alliance kept crawling back his way. Credit to both JT and Steven for being the dynamic duo who controlled each vote and utilized every option. Heck, at one point, as I said earlier, JT was so well liked and so well ingratiated that after he went on a reward with Brendan told the cameras he wants JT to win more than anything. He would be ecstatic to see the guy take home the money.
I had a really good day. I mean, it was a lot better than I had pictured. I figured Brendan and I being together would kind of be a dull trip, but it wasn't a dull moment at all.
If he wins it, that's like me winning this game. How do I get him to the finals? I don't know. This is the next step I need to wrap my head around. Let's have some fun.
At the final 6, JT and Steven decided they had 2 final 3 deals in place. Might as well just cut ties with the remnants of Tambira, and so they voted out Debbie and then Coach. But before I get to the very end, it needs to be said that JT goes on an immunity streak starting at the final 5, winning out the rest of the season, but Steven, JT's number 1 ally, very much did not intend to take JT to the finals if he had the choice. Steven knew how likable JT was, and so when the time came, Steven would blindside JT too. But yeah, the time never came, and I don't think Steven made any wrong choices here either. He had set himself up well enough to win had JT just not won immunity so deep, but hey, such is life. Meanwhile, JT was buttering up the jury, even voting to keep Coach at the final 5 just to save a pact he had made with the guy, instead painting Steven as the villain in the Warrior Alliance who turned. Steven... At the final 4, Taj had to be cut as she was a bigger threat to win than Aaron, and at this point, JT was planning to take Steven to the final 2 regardless. He knew he had the game on lock if he could just get there. And yeah, JT cuts Aaron at the final 3 and gives a great performance at the final tribal, although he kind of puts on a bit of an act, kind of like Chris from Vanuatu, in that he totally embellished some points to further his case. He admits to it at the reunion. He wasn't really that hurt that Steven would cut him. It's a game after all, but still, you know what? Good on JT for giving the jury what they wanted to hear, as he went on to get every single juror vote, winning 7-0, only the second player ever to sweep the jury in Survivor history. Go out on a high note.
The winner of Survivor Tocantins.
So now, let's get to Season 19, Survivor Samoa, with Natalie White, easily the most invisible, under-the-radar, unseen winner in Survivor history. Yes, not even the edge of extinction can rob Natalie of that title. Natalie was a young southern woman who arrived on the beaches of Samoa, placed in the yellow Foa tribe of 10, and right away on day one, she made arguably the greatest alliance of the season when she was approached by Russell to make a final two pact to the end. She agreed and she fell in line. This would be their secret little deal, except that Russell also went and did the same thing with like half the tribe, but still, Natalie's in the end proved to be the most important. Despite the fact that Natalie's tribe goes to tribal council a lot in this pre-merge, losing 6 out of 10 players before the merge, Natalie really doesn't get a chance to tell us much about what she's up to, or if she is actually up to anything. We know she's in an alliance with Russell. We know she plans to take Russell to the end because she believes that she can beat him. She recognizes that she is going to be a social player. She can form bonds with the rest of the tribe while Russell might just burn those same bridges. Through a lot of adversity in the pre-merge, Natalie outlasts 6 of her tribe mates entering the merge alongside Russell, Mick, and Jason against 8 members of the opposing Galoo tribe. No winner in Survivor had ever had the numbers so heavily stacked against them. And given there was no swap, she was pretty much meeting all of them for the first time. And yet, despite that, Natalie bonded well with the women, particularly Laura, over their religion, as well as Kelly and Monica. The Galoo tribe had a split between the men and the women, and infighting was happening, and Natalie floated the idea to pick off Eric first, a Galoo man, who would lead the charge against the women of Galoo when the numbers thinned. Eric was blindsided, and this would prove to be the beginning of the end for Galoo. But first, needs to be said, Natalie killed a rat. Oh yeah. True character development. Winners edit, anyone? From here, she remains loyal to her Foa allies and absolutely relies on Russell to play his second idol correctly, which he does, and the 4 of them blindside Kelly, now putting the numbers at 6-4. Likewise, Shambo had successfully been flipped at this point, credit to Russell too for stoking that flame, and really the numbers were now 5-5. At the final 10, the 5 true Galoo all voted for Natalie, and while I don't know exactly why they did that, I'm guessing it was either because she was least likely to have an idol played on her or find an idol, or because Galoo expected to go to rocks and wanted Natalie to be safe. I'm not 100% sure, but she does receive 5 votes from them. Regardless of why they did that, John flips on Galoo just like Shambo did, and now the Foa 4 had taken control. Where they entered the merge down 8-4, they now ruled the roost and continued to vote off the remaining Galoo, removing John, Dave, and Monica. At the final 6, Natalie was the tribe captain for a coconut reward challenge, and she was able to pick her team of 3, and she chose Brett and Mick. And while this wasn't a major game-changing move, I want to point out that she did this because if her team won reward, it would fuel Mick, the strongest guy left in their alliance, who could beat Brett, the last remaining true Galoo, at the next immunity challenge. Or, if her team lost, Brett wouldn't get any food, which would weaken him. I found this little detail a nice nod in the direction of where her head was, because a majority of the editing this season just doesn't tell us her story at all, and we're kind of left to figure it out in the cracks of the bigger picture. And so Shambo goes at the final 6 because Brett is basically Mike Tyson, winning immunities left and right. He wins the final 5 immunity, and he is a slam dunk to win the jury. If he gets there, everyone loves the guy. He was true Galoo to the end, and again, juries reward the players they like the most. Brett was pretty likable despite being even less visible to us than Natalie, nearly CGI if I'm being honest. So Natalie and Russell needed Brett to go, and they voted out Jason because Mick was their best bet. But it didn't matter, as Russell ended up beating Brett at Final 4, and even though Natalie had spent time bonding with Brett through this endgame, she openly told him, yeah, sorry man, you gotta go. It's pretty obvious why. Because the final 3 consisted of all Foa, it was Natalie, Russell, and Mick, and the jury was mostly Galoo, all 3 finalists shared a similar trajectory to get there.
I think there may be a little bit of strategy involved to Russell, making us feel like we're not going to win or that we don't have a chance, but I have news for him. I'm not going to give up, and I'll just explain to the jury, I don't work the same way as Russell. That would clearly not have worked for me. The girls that were aggressive, they got eliminated early. My strategy was to be myself, And at the end of the day, you know, I wasn't out to get anybody or make anybody look bad. Russell made it clear he was okay with making people look bad.
And I gotta say that the Samoa jury is one of my favorites to dissect because I've heard a lot of different stories from their side. For example, going into this final tribal, I have heard that it was Mick who may have been the favorite to win, but the problem was, during the final tribal, Mick just didn't own his leadership. He didn't speak with any conviction. Despite being labeled as the Foa leader on day one, he instead slinked into the shadows and just kind of acted feckless or lacking in strength of character, which really made this a final two between Natalie and Russell. And from the sound of it, while a few jurors voted for Russell to win, particularly Shambo and John, the other 7 decided all to vote for Natalie. Perhaps she was the least disliked player of this final 3. She also was definitely the underdog in stature and wasn't one to boast about her accomplishments. Perhaps she was understated, as we saw one juror rally to her side and kind of give her a voice that she kind of needed and plead to the rest of the jury to see that her game was just as valuable as the other 2. Many say that Natalie won because the jury here was voting against Russell and Natalie was the best option left. And while I can kind of see that argument holding water, I would also argue that being the least disliked, as well as maintaining positive relationships from the moment of the merge on, is a totally viable way to win. Natalie pleaded her case, owned what she could, and ultimately presented herself as the best option of the 3. Perhaps half of this jury was the big bad B word, bitter, at the outcome and the makeup of this final tribal, but then I would argue bitterness is a totally valid element in the rationale to vote for someone to win $1 million. And I don't know if Russell lost because the jury here were upset at his gameplay so much as it was his behavior and his attitude. And then it kind of begs the question, is your behavior and your attitude and the way you treat people actually a part of gameplay? Is blindsides and idle finds and big flips and votes enough to secure a jury vote? I would say it probably isn't. In the end, Natalie won not because she played the most tactical game or physically dominant game out there, clearly, but because she fostered the best relationships of the 3 players eligible to receive votes. Simple as that.
The winner of Survivor Samoa, Natalie.
Season 21, Survivor Nicaragua. On the heels of Heroes vs. Villains, this road is going to be going in a lot of directions. We got the youngest Survivor winner to date, Judson Birza, better known as Fabio, because he kind of looked like Fabio. Nicaragua was split between 2 tribes, a tribe of 10 young players, 30 and under, and a tribe of 10 older players who were 40 and over. Because anyone else in between would just be way too confusing for the audience. Are they young? Are they old? Who knows? Fabio was initially aligned with Shannon, Chase, Benry, Alina, and Kelly B. This gave them a 6-person majority of the 10. However, these numbers didn't even hold for a single vote, as this group intended to vote for Brenda, who was close to Chase, and so Chase flipped on them, at which point the numbers just fell apart. Shannon was targeted immediately for being the loudest, amongst other reasons. From here on out, Fabio would stay at the bottom for pretty much the entire season. Similar to Bob, half the time Fabio was in with the majority, but he was never in control, driving a vote, and would always be targeted down the line when the numbers thinned. But regardless of how poorly positioned he was, one of the best parts about Fabio was just simply how much he enjoyed his Survivor life. The guy was always laughing, always in a positive state of mind, always cracking jokes and playing the role of the fool. He didn't mind taking it on the chin, appearing as the dumb blonde who accidentally inhaled smoke, or got snipped by a crab, or peed in the pool, or gosh, the list goes on. That said, Fabio did have a rivalry with the biggest antagonist on the season, Nayanka. Nay didn't like Fabio, straight up. Just didn't like him. He was too much of a fool for her taste. But go figure, she inadvertently plays a huge part in him winning. I love situational irony. Fabio doesn't attend many tribals in the pre-merge, but he does get swapped into a majority position with fellow LaFleur tribe mates who control the numbers for the swapped portion of the game. Not to mention the Espada older tribe has a lot of division, particularly between Marty and Jane, and so even though Fabio was at the bottom of this big LaFleur alliance, he was never in trouble. Although his early ally Kelly B was sniped due to an idol deal that Fabio really didn't have much to do with. Really, Fabio doesn't have much to do with any of the vote outs this season. He's kind of there. So already we get to the merge and Fabio jumps on the dog pile to take out Alina. The early LaFleur tribe divisions are running deep and now he is totally just a hanger-on, a number for the bigger group. So Fabio joins a resistance in episode 9 when 11 people were remaining and he teams up with Marty, Dan, and Benry to vote out Jane. Fabio believed he would have Sash on board. They all went on a cool reward trip together, and it felt like a new alliance was forming, and with Sash came power in numbers as Sash was running the game. But it didn't work out. Go figure. And Marty left. Thankfully, out of the blue, the big alliance decided to turn on one another in the next vote. But first, another reward trip, Fabio went sliding down a volcano. If you notice, this entry is more just about all the fun and cool things Fabio got to do in Nicaragua for 39 days, which I'm sure he wouldn't have any other way. The majority alliance trimmed their numbers and turned on Brenda, another strong player who was usually on top, but for this one vote just happened to fall to the wayside. Following this move, a major stroke of luck occurred for Fabio when both Nayanka and Purple Kelly quit the game back-to-back in the same episode. Both were just fed up with playing the game and the harsh weather conditions. This put Fabio from being on the bottom at the final 9 to now being at the bottom in the final 7. Improvement. The last time Fabio would be up for getting voted out would be at the final 7, when it came down to either voting out him or Benry, Fabio's ally. The main alliance of 4, Sash, Chase, Holly, and Jane, decided to take out Benry as he was more devious. A vote I believe several players would soon regret, as Fabio goes on an immunity streak from this point onward, winning the final 6, 5, and 4 immunities to put himself in the final tribal. And I personally love this ending, if only because it is entirely focused on how this majority alliance trips over each other and basically fumble the ball into their own end zone. Meanwhile, Fabio is already there just waiting to pick it up and score.
On a scale of 1 to 10, I am about a 10 right now. It took me 38 days to finally get into a powerful position, but now I'm finally here. Sash goes, I'd be honored if you guys to be my wingman. I was like, Sash, dude, you can take a back seat. I'll let you take notes on how this is gonna go, because it's gonna be fun.
We see all the reasons why both Sash and Chase likely won't or can't win, and then they sit next to Fabio at the final 3 and huzzah, neither of them win. He comes across as very likable and again, kind of like Bob, quite disarming. He's a goofball and he owns it. He also gets really emotional talking about what this meant for him and his family and how much seeing his mom at the family reward gave him that extra bit of energy to get to this point and win those final 3 immunities. And yeah, Fabio wins by a razor thin vote of 5-4 over Chase, getting his winning vote from Nayanka of all people. Despite Nay working with Chase all season, she still turned around at the very end and gave her arch nemesis a tip of the cap. Hey, falling backwards into a victory is still a victory.
The winner of Survivor Nicaragua, Fabio.
And then lastly, for part 3, we have season 26, Survivor Caramoan, Fans versus Favorites 2, featuring 10 returning players, a lot of our favorites, and 10 fans of the show, all recruited at a local LA bar. Yep, the stage was half set for an epic showdown to rival that of Micronesia. But no, really, John Cochran is a super fan of Survivor. He is the winner of this season, and he lost in his first season 3 seasons prior, 23 South Pacific, and he was unique enough to get a second chance. Cochran reconnected quickly with a fellow tribe mate from his first season, Dawn, and they formed a strong duo that would last them the entire season. They basically worked together for all 39 days in tandem and both reached the final 3, so in some ways this is going to be the journey for the both of them, even though Cochran is the one who ends up receiving all 8 jury votes while Dawn gets 0. Straight away, Cochran and Dawn found themselves in the middle of the favorites tribe between 2 warring factions. On one side you had Corinne, Malcolm, Philip, and Andrea, and on the other you had Francesca, Brandon, Brenda, and Eric. Cochran and Dawn were able to choose the direction of the game, and ultimately they decided to go with Philip, who was leading the newly minted Stealth R Us 2.0 Alliance, reforming and carrying the torch from Redemption Island. This alliance would go on to run the game in pretty much every facet: the pre-swap, the post-swap, and the merge, with Cochran at the core. He was nicknamed the Intelligentsia Attaché, an academic elite, while Dawn was True Grit. With Francesca kicking rocks and going first from here, Brandon then rage quits because Philip was pissing him off, and then the swap happened with Cochran being placed alongside Dawn and Philip and Corinne in a majority position against 3 fans. With the numbers intact, all allies of Cochran's, these 4 picked off 2 of the fans en route to the merge. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, but that's what happens. It's a straightforward series of votes. However, we do have a civil war brewing in Stealth R Us, and once we get to the merge, we're going to see it completely fall apart. The merge of Caramoan is when the season, in my opinion, gets really interesting and starts to get spicy. First off, Cochran breaks out his inner challenge beast and wins immunity. Stealth R Us held a clear majority, as both Brenda and Eric, 2 initial outsiders, were looped in by this point. They held an 8-4 lead, but unlike a different purple tribe at the merge, they didn't totally blow it. The 4 fans remaining on the minority were split, and Corinne and Malcolm decided to join the outsiders to form a new majority, overthrowing Philip. A lot of craziness goes down here, and Cochran is kinda just like a steady Eddie through all of it, as Corinne approaches Dawn to flip on Philip, but she plays the spoiler, Dawn plays the spoiler, and doesn't, alongside Cochran, who also sticks with Philip. Together, they loop in Sherry, one of the fans at the very bottom, and they take out Corinne, followed by Michael, and then we get the 4th of July, we get fireworks, and we get Malcolm singing the national anthem. 3 guys on the bottom, the 3 amigos, Malcolm, Reynolds, and Eddie, held 2 idols and the immunity necklace. They played both of their idols at the final 10, and they told everyone to vote for Philip because they were. Cochran held firm and still voted for Malcolm, but Philip still went, and now, without any idols, in a 6-3 majority, Cochran and company split the vote on the amigos at the final 9 and proceeded to send both Malcolm and then Reynolds out the door. With one remaining player perceived to be on the bottom, Eddie, Cochran's alliance decided to get clever, picking off their own allies who they were now putting on the bottom. Andrea had an idol, and so the remaining stealth members decided to blindside her. And then Cochran and Dawn turn around at the final 6, they loop in Sherry, one of the last 2 remaining fans, and pulled off a 3-2-1 vote on Brenda, another big threat to win. Cochran always held this comedic, twisted grin where he knows what he wants to do is gonna be vicious, but he also recognizes it's probably the best move to make, and ultimately this is a game where you gotta make moves to position yourself to win. He brings up this blindside on Brenda to both Sherry and Dawn, and thus they fool Eric and Brenda to pick off Eddie, the same mistake Andrea had just fallen for in the previous round. Gotta be one step ahead. Unfortunately, from here, Eric was medevaced at the final 5 right after Brenda was voted out as they were making their way back to camp, and then Cochran continued his newfound challenge prowess in the final 4 by winning both of the final 4 reward and immunity challenges, cementing himself in the final 3 alongside Dawn, his #1 ally all game, and Sherry. He puts up one of the best final tribal performances, really exudes humility with a humble demeanor, expressing how much being here means to him as a huge superfan of the show, and he just owns his game, why he did what he did, and why he deserves to win.
This is the culmination of 13 years of passion for Survivor. Half my life. In high school, I used to wear a buff every night that Survivor was on. I used to pass out a newsletter. I wrote a paper about it in law school. This is an obsession.
Between Sherry kind of being a bump on a log, especially for the second half of the season, to Dawn not seeming sincere half the time, Cochran won all 8 jury votes and pulled off the second perfect game in Survivor history after JT by never having his name written down all season. Looks like flipping on his alliance to avoid drawing a rock paid off after all.
The winner of Survivor Fans versus Favorites, Cochran.
And that's going to be it for part 3, covering the road to victory for every winner in Survivor history. With only 4 roads left to travel, we are in the home stretch. Let me know what you think about these 5 winners. There's definitely a lot to be said, a lot that has been said, but Regardless, my name is Peridiam, saying thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed part 3. Don't forget to finish writing that Harvard paper about the survivor jury system on your way out, and I will see you in the next one once I brace myself for impact. Modern Survivor is about to be upon us. But first, Tata the Bushman.
We're all really excited. We don't really know what's gonna happen. Nothing could have prepared us for this little guy. His name was Tata.
The fire in the middle big, and inside the fire finished to cook.
It was entertaining more than anything. It was just fun to watch him. You can only understand half of what he's saying anyways. He's like a Filipino golem.
Oh, God, it's like a stick, nice long. Oh, very nice, very hard.